Swifters, it's time to finish up our Catch 'em All app, so we're going to add a detail view controller so that when you click on the creature of your choice, you'll be able to see some stats about that guy and an image as well. Now we'll perform this via a secondary call to JSON, and you'll also learn how to display images that you can get from any web URL. So let's finish catching them all. So let's start by adding a secondary view controller that will show our creature detail. So we'll head to the library, we'll search for a view controller, we'll drag it over and place it to the right of the list view controller, and let's add a segue from our table view cell to this new view controller. So I'm going to control click on table view cell. I've got it here in the document outline, so I know I've got the cell, and I'm going to release the segue line on top of the new view controller, and under selection segue, select show. Now click on the circle in the middle of the segue line to select it, head up to the attribute inspector, and give that identifier the identity show detail, upper camel case, one word. Then let's create a new Swift file for this view controller, so we'll put it underneath the list view controller, so I'm going to right click on that file in the project navigator. I'm going to select new file, Cocoa Touch class, next. I'm going to make sure that I'm subclassing UI view controller. I'm going to name this detail view controller, click next and create. And we can clear out all these green comments that we don't need. Now let's identify this with our new view controller, so we can option click on the main storyboard. Actually, we don't need the assistant editor, so I can close the source editor. Then click on the new view controller over here on the right and head to the identity inspector and set the class to detail view controller. And now let's add the UI elements to the view controller. So we're going to use the hybrid technique of adding a view and constraining that view, and then we'll put UI elements inside of that view that use auto resizing. So first for the view, we'll click on library. We'll search for UI view, and you want to make sure that you're grabbing just this view here. Drag the view over and drop it in the view controller. And we can constrain that at 0, 0, 0, and 0, adding 4 constraints. Now the default for this kind of segue setup will show the navigation item title for list view controller, which is the source view controller, in what would be the back button in our destination view controller. We don't want that, we want the standard back button. So to get that, we click the navigation item in the source view controller. That's this navigation bar up here, and we want to click on left item supplement and enter back into the title. So let's head to the main storyboard and do that. So click the navigation item in our list view controller, and back in the attribute inspector, click left item supplement and add the text back for a back button. And now let's add our interface elements. So first, the label for our Pokemon name, we'll click library, drag over a label, stretch it out side to side. I'm going to put in some bogus placeholder text. Swiftle is a Pokemon I'd like to see. And I'll change the font to custom, Avenir Next condensed, demi-bold style, 36 points. I see the label isn't sized right, so here's a tip. If you press Command =, then this should resize the text label exactly for the text inside it, but I still got to stretch out the sides end to end. And then I'll set the auto resizing. So on the outside lines, I'll set that to top, left, and right. The interior horizontal line should stretch the label out. This looks good. And then I'll click on the label, Command D to duplicate it. Back in the attributes inspector, I'll right justify. I'll put in some placeholder text, 9999.9. So this is, I think, the max size for any Pokemon. Then I'll shrink the left side of the label, Command D to duplicate the label, place this new label below the one above it, and adjust the layout a bit. Then I'm going to add the static labels, so I'll click library, find a label, drag it onto the view controller. This one will have the text height. I'll keep the font system, but I'll change the style to bold and the point size to 20. I'll set the color to system red. And you know what? I should have laid this out on an iPhone SE, so let's click on View As and see how things look on the smallest device size. Gak! Not good! That's because I didn't set auto resizing for these items, so let me properly position the bottom labels first. And I'll duplicate this height label, change its title to weight. And now I'll set auto resizing. So I'm going to command click on all 4 of these bottom labels. So all 4 of these ones on the bottom are selected. Then I'll head to the size inspector. I'll set auto resizing so the top and right outer lines are clicked. That'll work. And now let's add our image. So we'll click on library. We'll search for image view. We'll drag it to the left of the numbers. We'll resize it. And we'll set the image view auto resizing to outer constraints, top, right, left, not bottom, and the inner constraints will be both horizontal and vertical, and we can view as on a larger device, and it looks magnificent. So now let's add our IB outlets. We'll click on Detail View Controller and option click on Main Storyboard. We're in the Assistant Editor mode, and I'll close my Inspectors pane, and I'll control drag over from the name label. I'll call this name label. Now I always double check the type. It says UI label, so looking good, and I do this because it's really easy to click on the wrong item and set up an outlet for the wrong interface element and type. And then I'll use the document outline for the rest, so I'll control drag from the top number label, call this height label, the one below this, I'll call this weight label, and then I'll grab this image view over here, control dragging, and I'll just call that image view. And then we can close the main storyboard and we can start to code. And let's head over to creatures.swift. And you see this creature struct here? I'll highlight it. Now, when the table view gets selected, I want to pass over a single selected creature of this struct type over to our Detailview controller. And I can't do that now because this creature struct is a local struct. It's defined inside of the creature's class. So what I'm going to do is I've got this highlighted. I'm going to cut this out with a command X, and then I'm going to head over to scenedelegate.swift and right click on that so that I can create a new file just below it. Select new file, Swift file. I'll name this capital creature, and I'll click next and create, and then I'll paste in the struct that I just copied. Now that struct has project-wide scope. Then let's head over to detailviewcontroller.swift and we'll declare a creature type with var lowercase creature colon uppercase creature exclamation point. And the only thing that we're passing over that we want to display is the name. And everything else we're going to display on this view controller is going to be stuff that we get from the URL that we've also passed over. So to display the name, in view.load, we'll just say namelabel.text equals creature.name. And now let's pass over the selected creature. So we'll head back to listviewcontroller.swift and let's add a prepare for segue just below where we set up our activity indicator. So prepare for segue. And inside this function, we'll say if segue.identifier equals the string show detail, that's upper camel case, all one word, open and close curlies. Although with only one segue, we actually don't need the if statement since all segues will be that one segue, but we'll keep it in here anyway. That's really good practice. And inside the curlies, we'll say let destination equals segue.destination as exclamation point detail view controller. Then let selected index path equals table view dot index path for selected row exclamation point. And destination.creature equals creatures.creature array, and in brackets that'll be selected index path dot row. And now let's do a quick build and run and make sure that this part is working. So we're looking good. I'm going to click on Venusaur, and the creature name is being passed over. I'm seeing that name. Nice. Let's go back. Click Charizard, looking good. Blastoise, looking good. And so now the next step is to get the data into our Detailview controller, this extra data that we want on a height, weight, and image. Now, where does that come from? Well, let's take a look at the first page of JSON in our browser. So if we click on the link here below Bulbasaur, this is the first set of results that I've got. This brings us to another web page that has all of this JSON with lots and lots of information about Bulbasaur. So there's so much in here. If you ever want to go back and expand this app, you're welcome to do that. There's a lot more we could put in, and you should have all the skills to do that. But right now we want height and weight in an image. So I'm going to collapse the triangles here. I can see height is at the very base level. Now, what about image? Well, image is actually stored inside this sprites key here. We see there's complex JSON underneath that, and some of the different creatures have lots of different images, some only have one. After exploring this, I think the one that's most common is front_default. Now there are even some Pokemon even toward the end that don't have any images at all, but I think the best one for us to use is front_default, so we'll use that. And what do you see if you click on that? Oh, we get our little Bulbasaur. Nice! So let's go back to Xcode and we'll create a creature class so that we can hold the data that we want, and we'll also set up a getData call here that can access and get that data from URL session. So let's right click on creatures. We'll put the new file just below this. We'll say new file, Swift file. We'll call this creature detail, upper camel case. Create that file, class, creature detail, open and close curlies. Inside, we'll declare and initialize our properties. We'll initialize them so we don't have to create an initializer. So we'll say var height equals 0.0, var weight equals 0.0, var image URL equals empty string, and var URL string equals empty string. And then above this, let's create a private struct for us to use in decoding. So we'll say private struct, we'll call this capital returned, just like we did inside of our creatures class. That's got to be colon codable, open and close curlies, and inside we'll have var height colon double, var weight colon double. And the way that we get the image is inside of a JSON key named sprites that's got more complex JSON. So we'll say var lowercase sprites colon uppercase sprites, and then below we'll define this sprites struct where we can get at this key front_detail, and that'll give us the URL where we can get the image. And we'll show you how to get that image in the app in just a bit, but here we'll say private struct, capital sprites, colon, codable, open and close curlies, and inside we'll have var front_default colon string. And now we need a getData function. And hey, since we've already coded one that works, let's steal from ourselves. So we'll head back to creatures.swift. We'll highlight all of the getData function. We'll copy it. Then we'll return to creature detail and we'll paste it in just above the closing curly. Now Xcode immediately tells us what we can't use. You see these 3 lines here with errors in them. They refer to creatures data structures that aren't in this particular class. So we'll just highlight those 3 lines and delete them. And I'll fix my indenting problem in here with a Command A, Control I. And if I look at the end, it looks like I've copied over an extra curly brace when I did my copy and paste. So I'll delete that below. And that's fixed. So I'll return to the do portion of the do catch clause up here. And after I've decoded my JSON, I've got my returned constant in here. Now remember, this version of returned uses the data structures in this class. So my decoding is already done. I've set up those classes and I put them in returned. So now I've just got to peel out the different values that I want and assign them to class properties. And I do that with self.height equals return.height, self.weight equals return.weight, and self.imageURL equals, and this is the complex JSON returned dot sprites dot front underscore default. And that's it for our JSON coding. Once you get this idea of creating data structures to hold key value pairs that match up with the JSON, then getting the JSON from an API isn't all that tough, and you can reuse a lot of the code you've already written. So now let's head back to detailviewcontroller.swift, and I want to call getData to be able to get the creature detail, but we can't use that method until we've actually created an object of type creature detail. So let's just say down here in viewDidLoad, let lower camel case creature detail equals upper camel case creature detail, open and close parens. Now also before we perform the get data, we want to make sure that we've got the URL of the data that we want to get, and that was passed over in our creature object. So we'll say creature detail.url string equals creature.url. So if, for example, you clicked on Bulbasaur, we just put the URL that has all that Bulbasaur data inside of creature detail.url string. Now we're ready to call creature detail.getData. Creature detail has the URL string it needs to get data. It'll convert the string to a URL, set up a URL session, set up the task, decode the data, put the data that we need into the creature detail object's properties, and we're ready to display this data in our interface. So to do that, we'll say self.weightlabel.text equals, and this is a double, we've got to convert it to a string, so in between double quotes, we'll say string interp and put creature detail.weight in there, and then I'm going to highlight this whole line, copy it, paste it down below, change weight label to height label, and change .weight to .height. And jump cut, you can avoid the error I just experienced, so I built and ran, and I have this purple error in there. What caused that? You know it! I forgot to push these interface updates onto the main queue. They're inside of the background task because they're being performed as part of get data, so I'll just add a dispatch queue.main.async, cut out the lines down below, and I'll paste them between the curlies. Now let's build and run and make sure that our new get data is working. So here we are. I'm going to click on Bulbasaur, and hey, look at that. Now we've got its height and its weight of 7 and 69. Let's head back and check out some of these other Pokemon. How about Ivysaur? 10 and 130. Venusaur, 20 and 1000. Venusaur is hefty. How about Charmeleon? 11 and 190, looking good. Now I'm not sure if you noticed this, but there's an ever so brief moment where you can actually see the old default text of 999.9 in there. That's because we're not passing over our height and weight, but we're actually getting those via a JSON call. That call over the internet takes a split second, and you can actually see that on screen in the simulator. So I'm going to head back to main storyboard, and I'm just going to get rid of the default 9999.9 text from height and weight. So now for our final step, we want to get the image of the Pokemon and show it in our image view. And here's how we do that. It's a 3-step process. We want to convert the URL string to a valid URL. We're going to use the guard statement for that. It's totally okay to put this on a single line, especially if we just have a return inside of the curlies. We're not printing out any error statement. It's nice and compact. Then we're going to use a data initializer to get the data over the web using a URL. So this statement here, data contents of, creates an object of type data from the contents that can be found at that URL. And it might throw an error if it can't get back any valid data. So that's why it's in a do catch clause, and we've got a try in here. Then finally, we just convert the data into a UI image, and we put that into the image property of our image view. Let's code that up. So this is all interface code, so we want to make sure that it's inside of the dispatch queue, so it goes on the main thread, and we'll say guard let URL equal capital URL, open paren, select the option with the string, and we'll pass in creature detail dot image URL, else, open and close curly, return inside. We can put that all on a single line. Then let's prep for our try. We need a do catch, so we'll say do open and close curlies, catch open and close curlies. And inside of the do part of the clause, we'll say let data equals try, capital data, open parens. And you want to select this initializer here that has the contents of URL. Notice that this throws, which is why it's in a do catch clause, and our URL is going to be lowercase URL, a value we just created in the line above this. And if this works out down below, we can say self.imageview.image equals UI image open parens. We want to initialize this with the option that says data and then pass in lowercase data. Otherwise, in the catch clause, we'll just print out an error. We'll say print, and in quotes, error, error thrown trying to get the image from URL, string interp URL, angry emoji in front. Now let's build and run. Moment of truth. Do we have ourselves a preliminary Pokédex? Let's click on Bulbasaur. There he is, Bulb. Look at that. Let's check out some of these other guys in here. How about Venusaur? Whoa, looking good. The image is showing up sharp. Love it. Charizard, there we go. We can scroll around here, check out some other Pokemon. Mankey, I don't know that guy. Look at him. Wow. We can click and find some other ones in here too. Feel free to explore on your own, but Swifter, you've just made yourself a Pokédex, and you can expand this quite a bit on your own if you are a Pokemon fan. Lickitung, that looks disgusting. That's not good for the COVID era. Loves me some Snorlax though. So, hope you're feeling good about your skills, Swifter. Keep at it and catch 'em all.